What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and welcome to the Runaway Guide. And in this video, we'll talk about what Runaway is good at, what she's bad at. We'll explain her skills, her paths, her trinkets, and some teammates to help get her rolling. No lengthy exposition, let's just jump into it. Her strengths are that she has burn damage. She is the most consistent and strongest source of burn damage in the game, which can be pretty good. Her next major strength is that she is highly mobile. She has moves that move her forward and move her back, so it's very hard to keep her out of the spots that she wants to be in, and she can help fix your team by moving around. Her final strength is that she is a pretty good support unit. So she has smokescreen, which is insane. She can cure bleed, she can give fire to her teammates, she can cure blind, and then she can do consistent burn damage with things like controlled burn and her other burn skills. Weaknesses. What is Runaway bad at? She has no defensive token generation outside of Orphan and Stealth, so she can't heal herself reliably unless she's bleeding. She can't give herself dodge or block, which means that she's very dependent on her teammates to help keep her alive. Her next major weakness is that she is very prone to enemy resists. Her best damage is burn damage, so if the enemy can resist it, then she doesn't do a lot of damage. And one of her best skills is smokescreen, which requires 2 hits of debuff resist to make sure everything goes through when it's mastered. So if the enemy is constantly resisting her, if they have the hail modifier, then her effectiveness is really hard to utilize. Her final weakness is that a lot of her abilities are kind of niche. So if she doesn't have a reason to use Hearthlight, it's not on the bar. If she doesn't have a reason to use Run and Hide or movement skill, it's not on the bar, which leads to Bonnie feeling like a 2-button character depending on the circumstance. Next, let's talk about how to play Bonnie. So the easiest way to use her is to give her a couple support skills so she can help your team, depends on the region, but usually you want some supportive stuff. The next is to pick a main damage skill, so this is either something like Searing Strike, Firefly, Ransack, or Dragonfly, and then just give her the best chance to use that as much as possible. You don't necessarily have to build a dance team for her, but it is nice if there are other characters who can move themselves in the case that she gets moved or someone else gets moved. Next, let's talk about Runaway's paths and her skills. We'll start with the skills. And for her opening unlocks, you get these 5. Searing Strike is okay. I wish it did a little more damage, but it's all right. You know, if you just need a decent melee skill, this is it. Firefly is a very, very good move. However, it's only single target for, you know, some decent burn damage. The combo change is nice, but if you're running Arsonist or Orphan, this is usually your best damage move just because of the consistent damage over time you can deal. So this is really good for her. Smokescreen is really good at base as well as upgraded. This is one of the best sources of mastery points that you can spend on this character, because the double blind and the vuln and the combo, that is a loaded move. A lot of characters greatly appreciate having this. Next is Run and Hide, which is really her only defensive ability because it gives her stealth. And this move isn't that good even with the upgrade, sadly, and it's just because the game currently is very damage centric, so you should be doing as much damage as you can constantly, and this doesn't really give you damage. Hearthlight hits the entire enemy team and you can use it from anywhere. It gets rid of stealth, which can be helpful in some areas like the sluice, and it removes blind from your team when it's upgraded. It's not the easiest move to get a lot of value out of, but if you are able to remove, you know, a couple blinds from 1 or 2 people, especially damage dealers, then this is actually pretty good, but you have to have a plan in mind when you decide to use this. Next is Ransack. This is pretty much like Searing Strike without the on-hit burn, although you get the combo burn. And for this move, this is primarily just a movement tool. The on-hit damage is okay if you use something like Orphan, but otherwise you're either trying to pull the enemy or move Runaway. So if she needs to be up front, then you can pull her out of the back with this, and thankfully you can use it in rank 4. Otherwise, it is not necessarily the best move. Next is Cauterize, which is actually a pretty good heal, but almost not worth the mastery because 8% comes out to, I don't know, a couple HP. for the target, but it's nice. And the best reason to even use it is because bleed is just the most common damage over time type. It appears in every single region in some form, so being able to have someone that can remove it can be beneficial to your team. Controlled burn. This one is really interesting. It got buffed sometime in the middle of early access, and it's really nice because it ignores the stealth that the enemies can have, and even if they have dodge or if Bonnie is blinded, it doesn't matter that much because it starts trying to burn every turn after that. So every time the enemy takes an action, this will apply burn to them, or it will attempt to. It does not use Runaway's burn chance, and it's also not affected by Orphan. But with controlled burn, it's really good against bosses because a lot of bosses get multiple turns in a row, or like multiple actions per turn. So controlled burn can tick 2-3 times at a time and really ramp up the damage. It's a shame you can't use it in rank 4, but if you do have her, you know, in the first 3, then it is really good. So I think this is a pretty good move. So if you need to kill a boss, put it on. It's good for all of her paths. Dragonfly is a very strong move in terms of the burn. So you can see with the mastery, it goes from 2 damage to 4, which is really nice. And so if you have a way to keep her up front, she can, you know, dragonfly 2-3 times, and that usually kills most front lines in any region that's not like a size 2. So dragonfly is good movement ability, good for a lot of scenarios. I like it. It's just that Firefly is a bit more consistent. I shouldn't say consistent, it's just better because that is reach. There you go. Firestarter is a fun move because the apply on hit burn can apply to things that don't necessarily do damage. So like if you have Man-at-Arms using Bellow, which hits the whole enemy team, you can give him Firestarter and he'll sit there and burn everything when he yells at them. So you got, you know, Dragon Fire Breath Grandpa. And this gets even better if you use things like riposte or extra actions because it lasts for 3 rounds. But if you're getting extra turns in those rounds, then you are doing more burn every time you attack stuff. So this can be really good. You just gotta put on the right person at the right time. Finally, there is Backdraft. This got nerfed a bit, at least with the Trinket, and so it's kind of unfortunate. And the way Backdraft works is whatever the burn damage is on that target, the thing immediately behind it will take a percentage of that damage. So as you can see here, it's 50 normally, and then 100% when upgraded. This doesn't get rid of the burn. So if you can keep burn on them, you can keep, you know, hitting Backdraft every other turn and pump out the damage. But the reason this move isn't that good is because there's no other great source of burn in the game. So you have Vessel, who needs 3 conviction to burn a target. You have Plague Doctor, who can burn them every other turn with like 2-3 damage. So this doesn't ramp up that fast. It's still fun though. It's a very fun move, and it can have some interesting applications, but it's definitely not something you have on at all times. Those were all of her skills on Wanderer, so let's talk about her paths. Arsonist is my preferred path because you get the res piercing, and even though Orphan can do more damage, Arsonist is more consistent damage. And so this 33% res piercing gets you past a lot of things, and you can even burn stuff in the sprawl that aren't the boss pretty reliably, which is nice. Then you also get the crit chance on burn skills, and the minus damage doesn't matter because you're always burning stuff. And then the turn start self burn can be a bit dangerous, so make sure you're keeping an eye on it so she doesn't burn herself. And here is her Arsonist setup. I like it a lot. You get the red cloak, you get the stick. You get to beat him with the torch, apparently. Like, she just takes it off the back of the wagon and starts hitting people. I don't know, man. But with Arsonist, there are 2 ways to do it. And you can have her up front, for instance, with something like maybe like this. If you want to use Firestarter, I guess. Or Ransack to keep her up there. And you can put her in 1 or 2. And so she can Dragonfly to get a lot of damage, Searing Strike for like a single target, move back into 3, and then hit Ransack, and then come back up. And then you have Controlled Burn, which doesn't... The subsequent ticks don't use the burn chance, but the initial hit does. So you can get a little bit out of that. But my preferred way to play her with Arsonist is to drop her all the way in the back and use something like this. Firestarter's a bit, you know, negotiable, but otherwise you really just want to throw Firefly at stuff every turn and then Smokescreen big threats, and then actually you can't use Control Burn, so something like this. And you get Run and Hide just in case she's like dying, you know, it's not a great move. And you have Cauterize to heal your teammates, and then, like I said, Firestarter. But the whole thing is really dependent on Firefly and Smokescreen, which perfectly fine to build this character around. Next is Survivor, which is admittedly not my favorite path, just because you take away damage in the form of Resist Piercing in, as I keep saying, a game that really wants you to kill things very quickly. Instead, you get bonus healing, which is okay, and then you get speed and 2 dodge tokens at the start of combat. So this kind of alleviates her lack of defensive capability, but otherwise this path just really isn't that good. And so if I had to recommend a build, it's like a super support build. So you have Smokescreen, you're pretty much using this on cooldown. So you use something else and then Smokescreen and then rotate. And then you have Cauterize because you get bonus healing, so you may as well. And then if you upgrade Run and Hide, you'll get bonus healing off of this, but it's really still not that good. And so your other sources of damage come in the form of Firestarter, because you can throw that on other teammates, and then Controlled Burn, because the subsequent hits from the token, not the initial hit, but every hit after, does not care about Bonnie's burn chance. And so Controlled Burn can at least have a chance of applying. As far as where to put her, if she's just going to stay in one spot, then maybe like rank 2 or 3. So she can use Control Burn and all that. You can also put on Ransack so she can move up to the front, since this doesn't really care about your on-hit burn damage. But you can also run Searing Strike, because even though your chance to burn is lower, it's the same damage as Ransack. So if the burn does go through, then that's cool. So this might be the best for her to sit right here. And in terms of mastery, which I guess I know people are asking about that, so I'll talk about like mastery priority going forward. And with mastery, I would probably upgrade Smokescreen first and then just kind of leave her alone for a while, because she's not here to do damage. So Smokescreen first, Control Burn near the end, and then Searing Strike if you have extra points. Otherwise, the rest of it doesn't matter that much. I mean, even the healing off Run and Hide still isn't great. And finally, it's time to talk about the fan favorite path, Orphan. A lot of people like this one. I like Arsonist more, but this one is definitely cool and fun. And Orphan has a lot of text, obviously, but what it basically comes down to is she loses some HP, she does less burn damage the closer she is to the front, but she does more on-hit damage instead. And then she does less on-hit damage the further back in the party she is, but she'll do more burn damage. And she can also give herself a free crit by giving Firestarter to someone. And so the key to running Orphan is to decide what kind of damage move you want to spam, essentially. And there are 2 variants. The first is the one we talked about before, where you can use Firefly and put her in rank 4 and just spam Firefly, much like the Arsonist build, where it just does a ton of extra on or burn damage, not on hit. And if you do run this, then you should definitely upgrade this first, because your Fireflies are 7 damage for 3 turns immediately. That is a lot of damage, so it's pretty good for that. The other is you can put her up in rank 1 and use something like Searing Strike if you really wanted to. You don't have to necessarily use it, but you can. And so if you use something like Searing Strike, then, you know, if it's upgraded or if you hit the combo, you may get lucky and the burn sticks. And the reason that, you know, it's comparable to using Ransack is that they both do the same on-hit damage. So it's really if you just want the chance to burn, if you have the mastery, or if you want the pull or the extra reach with Ransack. Usually Ransack rank 1 is better, but Searing Strike's an option. And then for controlled burn, this doesn't, much like, what is it, Survivor, this does not care about the other modifiers for the extra hits. So the on-hit burn won't do much if she's up front, but the burns afterwards will work normally. And this can be nice, so you still have an option for burning targets. And then there's something to note. So shoutouts to Sirman and the Red Hook Discord, because they were very quick to help me with some questions I had. And they brought up an interesting point, and that is Dragonfly. So there is this apparently niche interaction with Orphan and Dragonfly in rank 2 specifically. So that's the one on your screen. And that is when you use Dragonfly from rank 2, it will get the on-hit damage, the extra 20%, so this raises it by a point. But when she moves back into rank 3, the burn applies after she moves, which means it'll get the +1 burn damage dealt. So this is a pretty cool and interesting interaction. So if you have some way to get her back into 2, I'm not quite sure what other moves can, I guess Jester, right? This is a good example. So if you have Fade to Black, which moves them back 1 space, you can Dragonfly on Bonnie's turn, she'll go back here, and then Jester can move back in blind. And so you get some consistent, slightly better Dragonfly, and that's pretty cool. So that's a really nice interaction for this. And in terms of what to build, just off the top of my head, I would imagine it's something like this. So you still get Firestarter, you still get Smokescreen, because it's really good, Control Burn, Dragonfly, and then Cauterize for some support. Next, let's talk about Runaway's trinkets, not just her class ones, but some other good options for her. And we'll start with Carved Toy. And this one converts stealth to crit tokens at, you know, half chance. The minus speed versus gaunt doesn't really matter because that's only, you know, the random zombies. And then the apply on hit for combo with Hearthlight is nice. This can be really cool and good, but you definitely have to have a team that can take advantage of it. But if it drops and you can make use of it, it's pretty good. I usually don't buy this one though. It's a little too clunky to set up sometimes. Knitted Blanket is really good. It's good for pretty much all of her paths, but this is really good for Arsonist because Arsonist has the self burn that you can resist. And so this way she has the extra damage. She can penetrate, burn resist because of the path, and then she can resist the self burn as well as the minus damage versus gaunt. Really just doesn't matter because she's damage over time, right? Then Pile of Ash got nerfed recently, and I'm really sad that it did. This used to do 50% crit on Backdraft, which could be really strong. And now it's just Backdraft gives you stealth, which it's not bad by any means, but it's definitely not as good as it could be or that it used to be. This trinket is just not in a good place right now. The extra dodge when moving can be good if you have a team built for it, but like I said, this one isn't really that good. Knitted Blanket's definitely the best of the 3 that she has. For neutral trinkets, there are quite a few good ones, but the ones that will stick out are something like Lockjaw. You can't use Smokescreen if you have Lockjaw, but if you do run this, you can, you know, use Orphan and just go super burn because now your burn's going to get through almost guaranteed. Misstep, since she does a lot of damage over time, you don't care about the minus damage, and this makes her super tanky. Could also be good. Snap Judgment can be okay. You know, you get that random crit token to pop up or give her some defensive tokens. That can be really nice. And she's not usually going to go last, especially if you have like a tank in the party, so it's a good one for her. And then the other ones that are kind of notable, like Seaman's Boots. If you run a movement build, this could be nice. But what she really wants are trinkets that normally come out of the Sprawl. Tinderbox, I'm not sure if it's Sprawl specific, I cannot remember, but this is like almost what she wears on her shirt anyway. So this is a very good trinket for her. And if you see it and you have a flammable item, definitely put it on. Snappy Swig can be super good. Just the extra burn damage dealt is nice, and if you can get her speed up using, you know, items or other trinkets or whatever, or a quirk if you get lucky, then her getting crit tokens can do a lot of extra damage. So this is good too. The Sacred Scribblings, I actually think this is probably the best extra burn trinket that she has access to, because if you have like Orphan, for instance, that gets the extra burn damage if in rank 4 and stuff, and you can consistently, you know, get the burns to stick either through debuffs or trinkets or what have you, then this is a lot of extra damage every time you hit them. Like, you are essentially applying a critical hit's worth of burn every time you hit the enemy, and then if you crit, it goes longer. So this is very strong. Then we have Laden Lantern. So if you're running Orphan again, or a Survivor, if you're not running Arsonist, then having the burn resist piercing is nice. This is a very good one to have, and it's relatively cheap at the shop. Enlightening Element, same thing as like Swig and stuff. You get extra burn damage potential, and if she has high speed, then she gets dodge, which is nice because she doesn't have really great defensive ability. The Smoldering Hymnal isn't as good for her as other characters, so this is kind of a miss. And then Charred Litany is interesting because on average, this is actually a net loss of damage, because losing 2 rounds of damage in exchange for 3 extra damage dealt is not quite worth the trade-off. If you crit, then it's a lot of extra damage, but if you're not critting consistently, it's not as good. But it does have some nice synergy with Knitted Blanket and Arsonist, so if she resists the random self-burn, she heals stress. And that's nice, but this is still, it's a good trinket. You just have to, you know, pair it with like Scribblings to offset it, for instance. So if you can figure that out, then this becomes a lot better. Let's round out the video by talking about some good teammates for Runaway, and you don't have to use all 3 of these at the same time. I just do this for the sake of footage. And the first one is Highwayman. Highwayman is really good at being able to move as well as Runaway can, so he can keep her where she wants to be, if she wants to be up front or in the back or what have you. And since they're both flexible in terms of their damage reach, you can do stuff like having Dragonfly up front into point blank shots, so you just wipe out the frontline enemies, or you can have Runaway throwing Firefly at stuff in order to get damage over time rolling, and then Dismas shoots it. And she can help him a lot by using something like Hearthlight in order to get rid of dodge on the enemies, as well as getting rid of blind on Dismas if it ends up happening, because there is that random chance of you using Take Aim and then you get blinded right after. That does happen. The next character to talk about is Plague Doctor. PD can apply damage over time on her own, so this helps out Runaway if you're going for that type of strategy. Since PD is another healer that can also cleanse damage over time, Runaway can save her battlefield medicine charges by using Cauterize. And finally, since Runaway can apply combo, if you do decide to use something like Disorienting Blast and upgrade it for the stun, you have a really effective way of getting it off. The final character we'll talk about is Vestal. Vestal has a few things that are helpful for Runaway, such as applying burn through Judgment. That is really nice. Vestal also has some really good support moves in her Consecration, so this can help pick up the direct damage on your team, as well as Consecration of Fortitude can give Runaway those defensive tokens that she greatly lacks. If you end up running Vestal with Runaway, you shouldn't be using Survivor as your path. The reason being that Survivor doesn't put out enough damage, and Vestal is already a low damage character, so you definitely should be picking something like Orphan or Arsonist in order for Runaway to put out the damage that Vestal lacks. Alright y'all, that's gonna do it for the video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you're thinking down below in the comments if there's any other synergy or ideas that I missed, or some cool combos that are out there. Feel free to drop them down below. If you want to support the channel or become more involved with the community, there's a lot of links in the description box for you to check out. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.